first of all, I'd like to say Happy Thanksgiving. I'm trying to get this done today so that I can post it for you tomorrow in case after your big Thanksgiving dinner, your sports fans are watching football. You can have a break for yourself and tangle with me. So today we're going to be working on still Inktober Tangles, 2 of them, days 21 and 22. The first is BS by Midori Furuhashi, and day 22 is Tile Wave by Yuruchen. Both are very beautiful, and I just love the challenge of taking the two and trying to combine them into one tile so that I can get the right amount of little pages in my book that I will show you at the very end of all of this. So this is my little one that I did. This is done in the round. I'm going to do one for you today on a Zentangle tile, 3.5 by 3.5 inches. And what I've done here is just go in 3/4 of an inch from each corner and make dots, and then I drew the lines to create this border. Because that tile wave is such a beautiful tangle for a border, I did another sample here on this phi tile, and that will just take quite a bit longer to do, but I'm going to do the same concept on this square one because I want you to see how beautiful this border can be. I have altered it quite a bit in terms of I will stop and show you when it's finished, the actual tangle, but then I put tangles inside. So let's go for it. I am going to get my 01 pen out, and starting at this corner here, I'm going to make my first step from the tangle tile wave, and it goes like this. We always start at the bottom and go to the top. I'm swinging it up ever so slightly from the bottom and then coming up and making a spiral. And I want to do 3 in this space and then 1 more here. So 1, 2, notice this little bit of a curve down here. And 3. And then I'm going to do 1 more from here. So they're not perfect, they're not exactly the same size. You do want to go, aim for that, but if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. It's not the biggest deal in the world. So now we're going to take from here, our second stroke is going to go like this. A little bit of a hill, and then in this curve, we're going to do another spiral. So we start out with a little bit of a hill, kind of like an L, and spiral. For some reason, my spirals at the bottom are always a little bit smaller than the ones at the top, and I think you should just go for what's comfortable for you. So then we want to make this line from the top of this spiral to the top of that one, and again, it's easiest if you just draw that from the bottom up because you can see where you're going. I guess I could have bowed up a little bit more too, but that's okay. And then we're going to put an aura line coming from the spiral I might be doing this a little different than the actual step out in terms of the spiral because my spiral has become mukas when I do that. In any case, I like it. So I'm going to keep doing it this way. This one is going off the page, so it would probably have a muka head right there. So those are the first 3 steps. Now we're going to do the last part, which is coming from this spiral and going up to the top like that. So what you have here are sort of, and then this one we would just pretend. So you end up having almost this leaf form here. And the actual step out is such that when you're done with that, you would just do, like we do often on Flux, we'll just do a line down and then 2 little dots to indicate that you're going into that corner there. But I'm really liking what I do with this when I add things in here. But let's finish this whole thing so we can really learn this tile or this tangle. So we're going to do 3 again here and then 1 more. So this one would have a spiral coming this way. So I'm going to just add that. Whoops. And then we would be going seems like an awful lot of steps, but you know, this is really, really worth it to learn this tangle. I'm really liking it as a border. Once again, 3 this way and then 1 more here. Okay, let's take a look here. What I did was I treated each one of these like almost spade or stingray shapes as a leaf. So I'm drawing a midrib from point to point, and then I'm going to do my veins. Wait the line a little. And then I'm going to continue doing that for all of them. Okay, now we're done with the border, and at this point I did add some more line work in here for the original sample I did, and I think I'm liking that, so I'm going to go ahead and add that in. You could also put pearls in here, which would be very attractive, but I'm going to go ahead and just, coming out of the corners, make 1, 2, 3 lines and bow them ever so slightly and make those little weights at the end. And I think it really gives it a pretty look. 1, 2, and 3. This is a lot of line work, but it will give you some nice Zen flow. I'm becoming more and more relaxed with every stroke. That is it. So now those are finished. Isn't that a pretty border? I just absolutely love it. So now we're going to do our second tangle in here. If you want at this point, you can also take your kneaded eraser and clean up those original lines that we made so that we knew where to be drawing that first tangle. And And we're going to put our nice big BS, which stands for B shape, and you'll see why. It's a rose. I just love it. It's going to be so fun. So right smack in the middle of this, I'm going to put a triangle. And then we're going to extend that triangle like that. All about equal lengths. So we've got this like little almost spoke going around, and starting in the corner of your triangle, we're going to do a B shape. Turn your tile, start in this corner, and do another B shape. And again. And now we're going to build our flower, our floret or our flower, by adding yet another B shape. And we're going to start at the top up here and just in the air go 1 and 2. 1, and the second one lands about in the middle of the hump of this B here. And then again, 1 and 2. So now we've got our first set, and now we're going to build those petals outwards. And in order to do that, we're just going to keep on adding them. Let's start. Okay, so this was my original triangle. So I think I would start with this hill and go 1 and 2. B. B. You just want it to be offset. And I'm just going to keep going until I get the flower the size I want. A little bit more. Where you begin and end is up to you. Sorry, I keep twirling it off the camera. Where you begin and end is pretty much up to you, but I think it's just important that you always have this kind of shifting of this, an offset. So you always have an overlap of one petal on top of the other. I hope that makes sense to you. And then in here, I'm just going to do a big orb and darken that. You can do a spiral. You can do several little orbs. And then you can, of course, do some line weight, but I might save that until after the end for after I've shaded. Now, I do like to have some leaves on these a little bit. So I'm gonna do a little bit of a rose leaf here. And how I'm gonna do that is just make my midrib, and I'm gonna start shaping kind of a jaggy edged leaf, because that's how rose leaves are. And maybe there's an awful lot of room up here. I could do maybe even two. It's always nice to have some overlap. And I actually think that's enough. You probably could have just left it at that. Or you could put some little fescues. So the beauty of this is going to be in the shading, right? So that's already done. You could also, to kind of, I'm going to do that. I'm going to make an aura line overall so that I feel like it's a joined frame. Just finishes it off. Okay, I think, whew, that's a lot of line work, isn't it? All right, let's go for shading. Let's shade our border first. That's the tidal, what is it? Tile wave, tile wave. And how I'm going to do that is basically up here in the tip, down the midrib, and I'm going to blend. Up here we have some almost self-shading going on with the weighted line. Just add a little bit more there. I'm going to do this all the way around. If you get a little bit too much, just blend or lift and blend again. You can blend a lot with what's on the tortillion if you use a soft enough graphite pencil. Okay, I think I got them all. There is a lot of shading here. It's going to last the whole football game, I'm telling you. So now we're going to go ahead and shade our inside tangle, BS. It's like a rose. So we want to view these like we often do as little petals. And the top of each of those, we're going to put some graphite. Let's just do a few layers first. So not down in here, but on the top, behind that arc. And then we're going to blend away and get a really sharp point here. I'm going to blend into the light. Putting a little bit on this inside one, sort of in the middle section of each of those bee hills, just so that it's toned down and it looks like the lip of that petal is in highlight. So what I'd like to do is now do a little bit of that color layering technique that we call grisaille. Grisaille is when you put down the shading, which creates the form, the three-dimensional form of your object, and then you go over it with a glaze of a different color. I'm just lifting a little bit with my kneaded eraser because it should not be so dark that it's going to look muddy. And this is always what's a little bit daunting and a little bit takes a lot of practice for beginners with the grisaille, is to get that balance of that form drawing underneath and then what's going to go on top. And you can also set that, look how much lighter my shading is now than, for example, this. So that's about the right amount of lifting, I would say. You can also set your graphite by taking just a paintbrush with clear water and brushing over the top, because graphite is very slick under a colored pencil, and it will just set that graphite so it doesn't swim around under your colored pencil. But I don't have time for that today. I'm just telling you that you can do that. I'm pretty practiced at this. So I'm going to take my first lightest color. We're just going to do a little bit of color layering. We've got one layer here. Our second is going to be our lightest next color, and then we're going to go in to more of the shading with the darker pink. These two colors are called Deco pink and process red. And then I have a white for blending. You can also blend with a colorless blender, which I have my Copic here today, and I think I will use that. I prefer, on paper, I prefer to color with a colorless blender. But taking my lightest color, I'm going to go right over the top of that, the whole flower, except for I'm saving out a little bit of white at the edge of each of the petals. I'm giving this a circular motion, and when I get on the graphite, I press a little bit harder because we want that graphite to actually just sort of just disappear under the layers of our colored pencil. So I am pressing a little harder there, but very light otherwise. And I'm just going to keep going around doing that same stroke. I'm doing a bit of an elliptical stroke here because we're in a small area. This could probably be lifted some. It's kind of dark. And don't be afraid to, lift again. I mean, if once you've started, it doesn't mean you have to, keep going that way. You can make it right. You can see that I'm not pressing hard because of where I'm holding my pencil. I'm not holding my pencil up here. I have no control that way. The further back I go on the pencil shaft, the more control I have over my stroke. So that's the first layer of our pinks, and now I'm going to take my process red, and exactly where that shading is, I'm going to go over the top of that. Staying kind of away from the edges and that other pink that we put down. I mean, we're going over the top of the light pink, but we're staying in that shaded area. Processed red is a very staining color, but I like the way this is so bright. It turned out really nicely on my sample, so I'm going to go for it. Very light. So really, once you get that grisaille down, that underpainting, that shading, it's a no-brainer. That's where you just keep building with those darker colors to get the depth. And the glaze is really easy. The original light glaze, if it's this light pink or yellow or even sometimes white. The grisaille, that underpainting, it makes you're halfway done. So we're getting to the point of needing to burnish this. And burnishing is nothing more than mixing these colors onto your paper, pressing them down until the pigments are actually melded together. So we can burnish in a couple different ways. I say this all the time, but if you're just joining me for the first time, we can burnish with a lighter color of the same color family that we're using. And in this case, I'm going to go back to my pink, and I'm going to go over the top of this processed red and press a little harder do you see how that's blending the colors together, burnishing them together? See how it's getting all nice and smooth? That is called burnishing. You can also burnish with white. For example, here we could add a little bit of white at the tips to blend that with a nice transition into the light pink. You can also use a colorless blender, and that is either a pencil that has no pigment in it, or it is the solvent that I like to use. And I would like to show you that. Again, here it is. It goes pretty quickly. I need to just find a piece of scratch paper so that I can clean. You always want to make sure you clean the tip. Even though this looks like it's got green on it, it doesn't. I always clean before I put my cap on, but it will stay stained from the last colors that you used. So there, it's blending nicely those pigments together. It's basically dissolving the pigments so that you can move them around on the paper. It goes a lot faster than that building up of light to dark to light to dark. Of course, you can do that too, but that's a lot more painstaking. So what I am trying to do is not dwell on the black line because the ink could bleed. Once you get rid of those toothy paper marks, you know you've gotten a good blend. And then you can go back in. We're going to have to go back in with some more color. I can see that already. I'm just going to get this initial blend down. And the nice thing is, if you use this colorless solvent blender, you can keep adding layers. If you just keep going back and forth with your colored pencil, at a certain point you get too much colored pencil on. It's too waxy. You get this sheen and it's not desirable. So this kind of eliminates that unless you really know how to layer very, very lightly, like nearly a whisper, if you're doing like 4 layers or 5 layers. Okay, so that's already looking pretty good, but I'm going to go back in a couple of spaces with my processed red. I don't want that gray to show, so I'm just putting the reds in there. And this, for example, got a little bit garish, a little bit too much. I'm going to take my light pink, go over the top of that and blend that down, pressing rather hard now. Wherever it's too pink. And here we could do a little bit more blending. Just so that all of that tooth is completely saturated with the color. Unless you want the tooth to shine through, which sometimes is a desirable look. Okay, I would say that's pretty much it. And then you could also go back with a white and hit up those edges. You can also use a white jelly roll there. But see, it's taking on the white quite well because I don't have so many layers that it's resisting, right? So this is a good sign. That means I did a good job of adding my layers without getting them too thick. Somebody was asking me about that on a tutorial. That's why I'm kind of going into that detail. Because they said, oh, it's not taking my pencil anymore, and it's because that person had way too much colored pencil on their piece. There's only so much paper can take, right? Add a little bit more pink. And then at this point you can also take your marker and restate some lines or make some little thick and thin areas. Rounding this little kind of spoke so it doesn't look so linear. Okay, now I purposely did not shade those because I wanted you to see the difference. See how flat that looks compared to all of the shaded areas. So I am going to quickly shade these. And there is our project. That is, here are my samples. Here's that one. There's that one. Here I did a lot of halaba in the background. Here I have a lighter glaze of the color. So enjoy our project today and do share your results with me. Thanks for joining me. Happy Thanksgiving. Bye for now. That's it for today's Tangle. Thanks for joining me. If you like these lunchtime tutorials, please give them a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I also invite you to check out my website for classes that I have scheduled or to purchase my Tangle tags for your favorite step outs. That's botangle.net. I'm leaving you with some other links too. Zentangle.com, where you can learn more about the Zentangle method from its founders, Rick Roberts and Maria Thomas. You can also visit their store there for a multitude of Zentangle paper tiles, tools, books, and kits. Tanglepatterns.com is that site I talk about where you can explore hundreds of tangle patterns, read about them, and get the step out, which is basically the deconstruction of the pattern. And finally, if you'd like to share your beautiful results with me and my student community, please join Annie's Botangle Alumni Facebook page. We're a private group where we inspire each other with our work and offer tips and useful information about art and Zentangle.